Hello and welcome to my channel, Vice Rhino here. Today I'm looking at a video called Scientific Evidence for God's Existence, Atheists Should Watch This, Evolution Debunked. It is rather long, so I'm going to take it in chunks, and the first chunk is mostly astronomy, because everyone knows that the best way to debunk a biological concept is to study astronomy, I guess. The whole video is basically a giant Gish Gallop of all the creationist arguments in one place, but since it's a video, I can press pause and reply to each individual point rather than let it get overwhelming. So let's take a look.
Over the last few decades, scientists from around the world have been making discoveries which clearly show that an intelligent designer is responsible for the creation of the universe.
Yeah, they've just kept it entirely to themselves. I'm looking at Google Scholar for articles that mention either the word God or creator, and the results seem to be either books, publications by an author who publishes as G.O.D. Rossenwasser, opinion articles, and philosophy papers. You'd think that if scientists were discovering evidence that points to a god, there would be a bit more excitement about it, but apparently not.
Many believe that the entire universe came into existence out of nothing by chance. But if you really think about it, nothing couldn't bring the universe into existence because nothing produces nothing.
How do you know? Were you there? Sorry, I couldn't help myself, but we don't know that the universe actually came from nothing. We don't really know how it started. We have ideas about it, certainly, some with more supporting evidence than others, but this all just amounts to the God of the gaps. We don't quite understand the very beginnings of the universe, therefore a very specific god must have done it. And that god is Odin. I mean Zeus. I mean Brahma. Wait, which god is it you're espousing again? Right, Yahweh, that one. So which of these specific gods is proven by the fact that stuff exists?
Everything that begins to exist must have a cause.
Do you have supporting evidence for that assertion? And why does God get to be the exception to the rule? Because he didn't begin to exist but has always existed? Why can't the universe have always existed? Why does God get to be the exception to the rule but not the singularity from which our universe expanded?
But many believe that to get a solar system like ours with a planet suitable for life like Earth wouldn't be that difficult.
It's not about difficulty, it's about probability. In order for something to be difficult or easy, there has to be a mind to be performing this difficult or easy task. So how likely is it that the Earth managed to form the way it is? Well, in a universe as big as ours, I would suggest that it's actually quite likely.
However, many scientists disagree and have brought forth overwhelming evidence to support their position.
Wait, scientists disagree that it's easy to get a planet like ours and have published evidence to support this? I've got to see this. Let's take a look at your sources. Bible verses, more Bible verses. Link to a website at the bottom, maybe his sources are there. Well, that seems to be a pretty similar Bible verse rant to what his video description was. I see his scientific sources are truly impeccable.
For example, there are many forces in the universe that are precisely balanced that do things such as pull matter together.
So, gravity exists, therefore God? I've never understood this argument. Nobody has ever explained to me why the existence of the natural forces requires a god. They just assert it and move on, as if they've made some profound point, but it just leaves me without answer. I've no idea why they even think that gravity requires a god.
Many stars have been observed to expand and contract significantly. They go from very bright to very dim even on a yearly basis.
Yes, those are called variable stars. They exist. They are a thing. There are many of them. I had trouble finding out exactly how many, but I got the impression that they are not in the majority. For instance, I found this paper where they studied the dwarf galaxy DD0210 and found a whopping total of 107 variable stars. I don't know how many stars are in DD0210 in total, but a dwarf galaxy typically contains anywhere from 100 million to a few billion stars, so 107 is barely a drop in the bucket. Now, what's your point about the fact that some stars are variable? How do variable stars prove God?
Fortunately for us, however, our star, the Sun, has an amazing stability. It does not expand and contract significantly like many other stars.
Well, technically our Sun is a variable star. It varies by about 0.1% over an 11-year cycle. Definitely not the most dramatic one out there, but it is a fact that our Sun is a variable star.
If our Sun did expand and contract like these other stars, it would be catastrophic to life on Earth.
Yes it would. But do you know what? I don't think life would develop around a star whose variation is so dramatic as to move the habitable zone back and forth constantly. It's really no surprise that life formed around a star that behaves in a way that is conducive to the formation of life. And there's nothing special about the type of star that our Sun is. It's a G-class star. About 7.6% of stars are G-class. This doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider the total number of stars that exist, which is estimated to be around 1 septillion, which is a 1 with 24 zeros after it, you still end up with 76 sextillion stars, which is a 76 with 21 zeros after it. And it is thought that this is actually a gross underestimate of how many stars are in the universe. And that's not including small F-type stars or large K-type stars, which could also be potentially conducive to life as we know it. In other words, there are plenty of stars out there that would have been able to support life as we know it without killing it, so the fact that life happened to develop around one of those stars is insignificant.
Some stars will actually explode violently into a supernova. The debris from these explosions are called supernova remnants. According to many evolutionists, this debris should be visible with telescopes for millions of years.
About 100,000 years, actually, depending heavily on the circumstances, of course. Could be longer, could be shorter, but I didn't see anything to suggest that it should stick around for millions of years.
According to scientific research, galaxies similar to our galaxy experience a supernova on average about every 26 years.
That passage you're reading from appears to be an excerpt from a book called In the Beginning, Compelling Evidence for Creation and the Flood. Let's see where citation A leads, shall we? Well, it seems to be citing a paper from 1970 on the frequency of supernovae as a function of the integral properties of intermediate and late-type spiral galaxies. Well, it's a legit paper, but why do creationists always have to go with old sources? This paper from 2006 puts the supernova rate at about 2 per century, so that's 2 times slower than the rate given in the creationist book, which, if I assume the book is correct in its next point about there being only 7,000 years worth of supernova remnants visible in our galaxy, then that stretches the time frame out to 14,000 years worth of remnants. But wait, there's more! There's a lot of interstellar dust in our galaxy. So much so that we can only see about 1/25th of the area of the Milky Way. So if we factor that number into the equation, we need to multiply this 14,000 years by 25, so now we have an estimated age for our galaxy of 350,000 years. Still not as old as astronomers agree it is, but it's a hell of a lot older than the 6 to 10,000 years that creationists want to see. Now we need to take into account that a supernova happens when an old star essentially explodes. The fastest star to live and die have lifespans of about 10 million years, so that's at least 10 million years before the first supernova event would have happened, bringing us to an age of 10,350,000 years old. Now let's go back to the beginning. How long are supernova remnants visible for? Roughly 100,000 years. Factor that into the equation, and it appears as though we should only be able to see about 2 to 300 supernova remnants at any given time, regardless of the age of the galaxy, which is right in line with the number that is usually claimed by creationist sources, but which I've been unable to verify at this time.
Therefore, if we know approximately how frequently they occur in galaxies similar to ours, the total number of supernova remnants we have in our galaxy should give us an idea of our galaxy's age. In looking for supernova remnants in our own Milky Way galaxy, astronomers have discovered a total of only about 250.
Excellent. So that's right in the ballpark of what would be expected based on how little of our galaxy we're able to see. Now I'm skipping a bit because he spends a lot more time talking about how the Earth is in the perfect position for life, and I feel I've already addressed that point.
On Earth, many different forms of life are completely dependent upon each other. Examples are insects and plants such as bees and pollen-bearing plants. If either the plants or bees evolved before the other, they would have not survived. Therefore, they must have come into existence at the same time.
Yes. I guess. Sort of. They came into existence together in the sense that they evolved together, slowly, over millions of years. For the sake of time, let's start plants off in our hypothetical with rudimentary flowers that sexually reproduce via the wind, which is still a method that some plants use today. At some point, the bees discovered that this pollen was a food source. Bees that used it as a food source then had a survival advantage over those who did not, so produced more offspring. The plants with pollen that sticks just a little better to the bees have more of their pollen survive the trip to the next flower, and so continue the plant lineage, and the bees with small mutations that allow them to collect more pollen at one time have a survival advantage. And so each group, plants and bees, get a little better at playing the symbiosis game until you wind up with the system that we see today, where they are, in some cases, entirely dependent on each other.
The Earth's ocean basins and atmosphere have just the right mixture and balance of gases. If these gases were changed in any way, animal life and vegetation on Earth would die.
Yeah, say that again, but this time to the climate change deniers. But that being said, the climate and atmosphere have been vastly different in the past. There was a lot more CO2 in the atmosphere before photosynthesis evolved, but eventually photosynthesis turned the CO2 into oxygen, and the levels of oxygen and CO2 have been changing slowly ever since, depending on what the life on the planet is doing at the time. And the climate has shifted several times as a result, and usually was accompanied by a mass extinction event. Right now, the dominant life form, which isn't a bug or bacterium of some kind, happens to be dumping CO2 into the atmosphere at an unprecedented rate. I'll let you do the math on that one. Suffice it to say that the environment has not exactly been a steady factor throughout Earth's history, and when the climate shifts, it does have a negative impact on whatever life is there. But so far, life has been able to bounce back.
Life, finds a way.
Evolutionists have no explanation for why the Earth, unlike other planets, has such an incredible amount of water.
Are you serious right now? There's tons of water out there. Hydrogen and oxygen, the elements that make up water, are some of the most abundant elements in the universe. There's literally water everywhere in our solar system, from frozen lakes on the bottom of some of Mercury's polar craters, to the vast subsurface oceans of the moons of Saturn and Jupiter, to the comets of the Oort cloud. Water is everywhere we look, even on Mars and the Moon, which are some of the driest places we know. The presence of water is, quite literally, one of the least remarkable features of our planet.
We also have a planet that is rich in oxygen. If our current 21% oxygen level were just a few percent higher, our atmosphere could become completely unstable and explosive.
I really want to know your source on that, because my source, the Smithsonian in this case, linked down below, says that the oxygen in the Carboniferous period was up to about 35%, which is 15% higher than today's 20% levels. That's not an insignificant difference. At what percent exactly does the oxygen start to destabilize the atmosphere?
Earth has a magnetic field. Without this field, the solar wind would blow our atmosphere away. Earth's atmosphere blocks harmful sunlight, while at the same time it allows sunlight that is useful for life. Plants require large amounts of sunlight to exist, and a human being's richest source by far for vitamin D is sunlight.
It's almost as if we evolved to take advantage of our largest available energy source. Funny how that works. Are you going to make any points anytime soon, or are you just going to keep listing traits that the Earth happens to have? I can do it too. The sky is blue. Blue is pretty. Therefore, the sky was made to be pretty for us. Rocks are hard. Hard things stand up to the weather better than soft things, so clearly the rocks were made for us to build houses out of. Get on to an actual point, please.
A total solar eclipse is only possible because the sun is 400 times larger than the moon and is about 400 times farther away from the Earth.
That's nice, but the moon is receding, so it wasn't always that way, and it won't always be that way in the future. Does this have any relevance to the age of the Earth?
The result is that during a total solar eclipse from Earth, the sun and the moon appear to be the same size, creating a perfect match. And it is only because of these total solar eclipses that we have been able to make scientific discoveries that otherwise could have never been made.
You mean like confirmation of the theory of relativity with gravitational lensing by Arthur Eddington in 1919? Even if that were the only way to have confirmed the theory, which it isn't, that hardly means the Earth-Moon system was designed to be perfect for us. It was just luck that the right technology was around during the hundreds of millions of years that the moon would be the right distance away. Oh wait, that's actually not that impressive, knowing how long the moon would be able to totally eclipse the sun. And remember, Eddington confirmed a theory by observing gravitational lensing. If there was no moon, it would just have had to wait until later when we discovered something like Einstein's cross, which is a gravitationally lensed quasar. It's not like relativity has a hard time waiting for new discoveries to confirm it. It was almost exactly 100 years, after all, since Einstein used his theory of relativity to predict gravitational waves in 1916, and their direct detection at LIGO in 2015. Was that gravitational wave sent just for us?
Evolutionists believe that the Sun, Earth, and Moon formed when our solar system came into existence about 4.5 billion years ago. But the Moon is moving farther away from the Earth each year. So if the Moon were too far away or too close to the Earth at the time humans existed, observers on Earth would never see the event of a total solar eclipse.
If you want to see me do the math on this, I will link to the last video where I covered it, but essentially if the moon receded at its current rate for 4.6 billion years, then it would be about 205,000 kilometers away from the Earth 4.6 billion years ago. So no perfect solar eclipses 4.6 billion years ago, but hardly doomsday. Besides, it's moving away so slowly that the total solar eclipses would have still been about the same as they are today for at least a few million years, plenty of time for all of human history. And even if this were not the case, it is completely irrelevant to whether or not God exists. There exists a chunk of rock that sometimes goes between us and the sun. Wow, amazing. Know what else? I put my thumb at arm's length up to the moon, and it was the exact perfect size to eclipse it. Isn't it amazing? Must be God.
Thus, according to evolutionists, the incredible total solar eclipse spectacle could only be seen in a tiny window of time in the solar system's existence.
Well, hundreds of millions of years is still pretty small compared to the billions of years that the Earth-Moon system will exist for, but it's still more than enough to encompass all of human history with generous error bars on either side.
Evolutionists claim that our solar system emerged from a cloud of swirling dust. Therefore, the composition of the various planets and their temperature should be similar to one another, but they are not.
Nope. I'll give you credit though, this argument is new to me. But why would we expect them to all have the same composition and temperature? Who ever claimed that the swirling dust cloud, more properly called an accretion disk, was of uniform composition? Why would we expect it to be of uniform composition? And as for temperature, there are so many variables that can affect that no serious astronomer would ever expect all the planets to be the same temperature. First and foremost is the sun. How could you possibly have missed this? Mercury will be warmer than Neptune for the simple reason that it's closer to the heat source. Think of a campfire. Does it keep you equally warm when you are 3 meters away as when you are right next to it? Same thing. Then there are the different compositions of the planet's atmospheres. Venus is much hotter than Mars because it has a very high concentration of greenhouse gases, while Mars has an incredibly thin atmosphere. Greenhouse gases trap heat, a lack of atmosphere allows the heat to be radiated off into space. And these are just two of the factors that affect temperature. On the Jovian planets, you also have to account for things like heat from atmospheric pressure. But let me leave this obviously ridiculous temperature argument and focus more on composition. Why was the accretion disk not uniform? Well, let's consider where the material to form the accretion disk would have originated. Our solar system formed as a result of another star-going supernova, so there already would have been clouds of dust and some lighter elements in the area that we now occupy, but when the nearby star blew up, it would have formed the heavier elements that are also found in the solar system. But this is not a uniform process. There are variables all over the place. One chunk of iron goes this way, one cloud of hydrogen goes the other way, the chunk of iron gravitationally attracts to larger chunks of iron and gradually increases in size, etc. This is a big, messy process, and there is no reason whatsoever to expect uniform planets to result from it. And aside from all of that, I don't even know how this would help your case. I would think that uniform perfect planets would be evidence in favor of creation, as if a mind had a plan when it designed the solar system. Instead, it looks like a bunch of different chunks of rock and other materials just kinda jumbled together in essentially a random fashion to form what we see today.
Those who adhere to the Big Bang Theory actually believe that all matter in the universe was originally concentrated in something much smaller than a pinhead.
Yes, but not because we'd rather believe something absurd because we're resisting the idea of a god, more because that's where the evidence points.
Then it exploded, expanded, and the ordered system of things we see today came out.
I wouldn't describe everything as ordered. I mean, it's all held together by gravity, and any given snapshot will look pretty and orderly, but as you yourself pointed out, our own solar system is a big jumbled mess of planets with different compositions and different characteristics, almost like they were thrown together randomly. Hell, the outer planets all have what are essentially junk piles left over from the accretion disk orbiting them. Then the Oort cloud and the Kuiper belt are themselves big jumbled messes of debris that never really made it to the inner solar system from the accretion disk. Everything about the solar system looks like it was produced by an explosion from another star. If it were planned and put together, the planner was incredibly sloppy about it.
However, there are big problems with the Big Bang Theory. First, if you concentrated all the mass in the universe in that much smaller than a pinhead starting point, there would have been so much gravity there that nothing would be able to escape it.
Well, since we're dealing with sizes, masses, and temperatures that go beyond what classical and relativistic physics can explain, it stands to reason that the standard model of physics is incomplete. AKA, we don't quite know why it didn't collapse on itself. So let's just leave this as an unknown for now and look at the cosmic microwave background, or CMB. The CMB is the earliest electromagnetic radiation in the universe and dates to about 378,000 years after the initial expansion. I love the CMB because it demonstrates the qualities of the scientific method so well. Firstly, it was predicted before it was discovered. In 1948, Ralph Afer predicted it when researching Big Bang nucleosynthesis. Their research suggested that the CMB would exist if the Big Bang theory was accurate. Then in 1965, Arno Penzias and Robert Wilson accidentally discovered it when they were confused by noise being picked up by a radio receiver that they were working on. Then, with further study, they were able to peg the age of the universe to 13.7 billion years, but in doing so, they discovered that the earliest stars began forming about 200 million years after the Big Bang, which was far earlier than what had previously been predicted. So rather than dogmatically hold on to their conclusions about star formation, they did further research to find out where they went wrong. So the CMB not only demonstrates that the universe is at least 13.7 billion years old, a number which was later refined to 13.8 billion years old, it also shows that scientists have made predictions based on the Big Bang theory that held up to scrutiny, and it demonstrates that if some result is not what they expected, they are willing to change their conclusions based on new evidence. So looking at this and many other examples of scientists being willing to change their conclusions based on new evidence, can we please just do away with the idea that the scientists are dogmatically holding to old ages and evolution? The scientists who made the major breakthroughs with the CMB won Nobel Prizes and the Breakthrough Prize in Fundamental Physics for shaking up the way science had understood the universe previously, not to mention the renown that comes with those prizes. There are huge scientific incentives to shake up the consensus because scientists are interested in knowing where they are wrong so they can make further progress. There is literally zero incentive for any scientist to remain part of some larger conspiracy to retain old ages and evolution.
Second, explosions don't produce order, they destroy order.
Which is exactly why we don't see a bunch of uniform planets like you seem to think we should see. Like, you're literally refuting your own points. If you look up at the sky, you see a big jumbled mess of stars clumping together, separated by clumps of dust and debris, separated by empty space. The only reason that it could be said to look orderly is because the way gravity works happens to draw things together into circles and swirls. But it's not orderly at all, it is quite chaotic. Why do you keep jumping back and forth? If everything should be random, then why would you say we would expect to see uniformity among the planets? We see randomness all over the place in the universe. And to placate my commenters, yeah, I know it wasn't an explosion into space, it was an expansion of space, minor technicality, or major technicality if you know the math behind it. I don't, at all. So, minor? Sure. My point here is that we don't see order, we see chaos, which is exactly what he's saying we should see if the Big Bang were true. Just because it's pretty swirly chaos doesn't mean it's not chaos.
Also, if a Big Bang exploded everything, the planets and moons would be spinning in the same direction based upon a law called the conservation of angular momentum.
Yep, you're absolutely right. At first. But then do you know what happens? These big spinny swirly objects bump into each other, or fly past each other. In a big chaotic mess, things collide all the time. And do you know what happens in a collision? Transfer of momentum. Not to mention the weird fluid dynamics with atmospheres and such. I assume you're about to bring up the fact that Venus spins backwards.
But we have moons and planets spinning both forward and backward.
Yep, there it is. Well, the short answer is it will be different in each case. Venus, for instance, has 3 competing hypotheses for why it spins backwards, all of which have more supporting evidence than because magic. To dumb it down quite a bit, there's the impact model. Venus was hit by something during its early formation, which caused it to change its spin. Then there's the idea that Venus flipped upside down at some point in its history, likely as a result of interactions between the planet's core, crust, atmosphere, and tides caused by the sun. The third idea is that Venus actually slowed down in its rotation and then reversed as a result of the same interactions between the core, crust, and atmosphere combined with tidal forces and interactions with the sun's magnetic field. For more detail on all 3 of these, go check out SciShow's episode on why Venus spins backwards. Uranus and the moons will have different reasons for their spin, because our solar system is a big randomly formed chaotic mess of a place.
Comets are also estimated by evolutionists to be billions of years old.
I think you mean astronomers. They are estimated by astronomers to be billions of years old. They are basically remnants of the accretion disk of our solar system, so they are probably about 4.6 billion years old. An evolutionary scientist probably wouldn't even try to estimate the age of astronomical objects, as it's outside their field of expertise. Biological evolution has nothing to do with comets.
Comets frequently collide with planets and the sun.
I couldn't find detailed information on the frequency of these collisions, so I'll just grant you that point for now. I don't see what it has to do with the age of the solar system or the universe anyway.
Comets are called dirty snowballs because a significant part of a comet is made up of ice.
Yeah, water ice. Remember earlier in your video when you said,
evolutionists have no explanation for why the Earth, unlike other planets, has such an incredible amount of water.
One of the explanations for where our water came from is a bombardment from comets when the Earth was young. So here you are explaining to us that comets are made out of water and frequently hit planets, but earlier you said we can't explain where all our water came from. Well done.
When comets travel in space and move closer to the sun, they begin to lose mass as they are burned up by the sun. Therefore, comets could only last maybe 10,000 years before all of them would be burned up.
That's just not true. The average lifespan of a comet is about 10,000 years, but that's for a comet that's orbiting in a way that has it coming into the inner solar system. The vast majority of comets exist out in the Oort cloud and Kuiper belt, where they can hang around for billions of years. And in this chaotic, disordered universe, they will occasionally bump into things or have objects pass close by in a way that gravitationally alters their orbit, which will cause them to fall into the inner solar system. So there is a massive fresh supply of comets surrounding the solar system, and no reason to think that they wouldn't occasionally get knocked into the inner solar system. So the fact that we still have comets is simply more evidence that the universe is a big chaotic mess. Okay, so that's it for now. Almost a third of the way into his video, and evolution has still not been debunked. I can't wait to get into the next part. Remember to follow me on Twitter and support me on Patreon. See you next time!